My name is Patrick Marsolek. I live in Helena, Montana, and I'm a researcher and writer, and I teach intuition and remote viewing classes in Montana. And I come into this field from a little different perspective than many of the people that have been speaking so far, although I agree in many, many ways, and I'm very excited with what's being presented here. My experience comes from my own explorations into consciousness, into meditating, doing yoga, exploring my own awareness of who I am, and that is the focus in the classes that I teach. So this is going to be a little shift from what we've been doing so far, in that this is going to be more experiential, what we're going to do in the next 45 minutes or an hour. I'll probably cut it a little shorter so we can kind of get back on schedule after I'm done here. And so within this, shifting over to sensory awareness and to experience, I'm going to have each one of you here that's willing to and wants to do some experiences of your own to get a sense of how attention and sensory awareness, how we focus our consciousness, can directly relate to the work that we do with remote viewing and with using intuition. And like Russell Targ said, any experience you have meditating, focusing your mind, training your mind in some way, and the same thing as Dean Radin said this morning also, that it will affect the way you can remote view. It will affect the quality of your sessions. It will affect your ability to differentiate the signal line from the noise that's there with it, to be able to differentiate it from all the other sensations that are normally going on in our awareness. So, has everyone got a piece of paper handed out? And I handed out pine cones. Did everyone get a pine cone? Paul? Okay, they're going to be going around. And if anything, you get at least to walk away with a pine cone from Montana. So, consider that an added bonus. That'll be part of the sensory awareness. As I'm doing this presentation, I'm just going to have several slides up that are more landscape, more scenic, and you can just enjoy them, look at them, enjoy the imagery. Part of this, once again, is going to be, I'm going to show you some things, some ways that you can begin to become aware of many different things that affect your attention and affect your awareness. And so even now, as you're sitting, you're listening to me, you're thinking, perhaps you're thinking about your lunch, perhaps you're thinking about some of the presentations that you listened to this morning. So even while you're doing that, there's many different levels of our awareness that basically are always going on in our consciousness. And just to say right now, while I'm thinking about it, an important part of this is that my feeling is the more you can recognize what's in your consciousness in an ordinary state, right now, for instance, as you're sitting here, if you can be aware of things that are affecting your awareness, that are affecting your attention, and learn to be aware of those things, it will carry over into your work doing remote viewing, to your work using intuition, and that you're basically learning a skill that you're going to be using regardless of how you're perceiving. If you're perceiving intuitively, if you're perceiving normally. So for instance, right now, sitting here, what sounds are you aware of? What sensations in your body are you experiencing? And are you aware of them at all while you're thinking, while you're listening to me? And so some of those kind of thoughts, just starting to put it out there a little bit, there are many different ways of focusing our awareness, and there are many different levels of information to be aware of. So, there's another nice one. I forgot to show that one. Can you see that okay? Is that a little dim? Is there any way to brighten up that slide? You can turn down the lights, that'd be fine with me, if someone wants to do that. This is just a brief, simple chart, not certainly comprehensive by any means. In the back. Take that in the back. Of some of the kinds of things that grab our attention. We have internal processes going on, our body needs, hunger, temperature fluctuations in our body, emotions, thoughts. And we have external stimulus that are grabbing our attention, all kinds of sensorial information, all the senses, emotions that are also external to us that we may be perceiving. So what I'm going to do, the reason I gave you these handouts right off the bat is on the back side of the handouts there's a blank sheet of paper. So what I want you to do now to start this experiential process is to take a pen. Hopefully if you don't have one, just ask your neighbor for one. What I want you to do is just to go through those words there, thoughts, emotions, feelings, and just write down anything at all that you're aware of that you're experiencing right now. Are there any thoughts? Are you thinking about what you had for lunch, a conversation you had perhaps, somewhere you're going later? Any emotions? Any feelings? That's good. And as you're doing that, you may notice that it starts to shift your awareness just a little bit. The tendency with this kind of format is to focus all of your attention not only on me, which I want you to do to some degree, but also on that mode of attending, focused and objective, focusing on the words and the thoughts that the words I'm saying may bring up in your mind. And so part of us turning to a more sensory mode of awareness is we're going to start to include what you're feeling as well into your experience of what I'm saying. Does that make sense? So that starts that shift. That starts a little shift in your awareness. You may notice that you become aware even of how you're sitting, which you weren't aware of a moment before. There may be tensions in your body that you haven't been aware of. And anytime you notice something that needs your attention, you can respond to it. You can move your body if you need to, take a deep breath, and still focus and still have the ability to engage yourself with the information that you're listening to and that you're watching on the slides. And so throughout the rest of my presentation, I'm going to be talking about flexibility, being able to be flexible between a focused awareness and a more diffuse awareness. Can you be aware of the sounds in the room around you as you're aware of my voice and what I'm saying? And it takes some practice too. So this starts a little bit of a shift. One way of thinking about it, and this is just one way. This is from a book on hypnagogia by Andreas Mavromatis. And all of these slides are in your notes, and all the references are in that handout that I gave you. So you don't have to worry about writing it down. You have it already. Generally speaking, we spend most of our day in the left side of our brain in a more active mode, which would be the action mode up here. Muscle system and nervous system dominant, up more in beta. It's more a state of doing, of achieving something, of striving. Psychological attributes would be having a more focused attention, having a very concrete sense of self, of who we are, distinct and distinguished from everyone else that's around us. And yet, as Russell Targ said earlier, we're, at a deeper level, we have this concept that we're all interconnected. Yet we don't normally go around with that kind of awareness in our consciousness, in our attention. But as we begin to shift over to a more perceptive mode of awareness, allowing the sensations in our bodies, in our minds, it starts to shift to a right brain mode of awareness, which is more sensory dominant, parasympathetic systems more prominent, the automatic systems in our bodies. The EEG will start to drift down towards alpha. And it's a state of allowing, of passivity, of relaxation. And the psychological correlates of this are a more diffuse mode of attending. Awareness tends to smooth out a little. And the state of your ego sense also tends to expand. When you tune into the sensations on your skin, you suddenly begin to sense yourself in a more broader state, perhaps even connected in a small way with the person sitting next to you or in front of you or behind you. So this is just one way of thinking about it, continuing that process of starting to shift out. And we're all going to start to shift out more and more. And I'm going to lead you through an exercise in a few minutes to experience that a little deeper. And just to say now, at the end of this, we'll do a simple remote viewing exercise. Just to give you a taste of one other way of experiencing this, the process of remote viewing and of using intuition. So this is a fairly familiar optical illusion. You can either see this as a vase or as two faces looking at each other. Is there anybody that can't see both of those options? Okay. So what we're going to do now is taking that piece of paper you have in front of you, is we're just going to do a little exercise to shift a little more into the right brain mode of thinking. And one of the guests mentioned earlier a book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betty Edwards, which is a classic in teaching you how to draw. Anyone that can't draw and wants to draw, I recommend it. And I think I mentioned it in the notes as well, so you have that reference. So what we're going to do is, what I want you to do is just think in your mind's eye an image of a human profile, the profile of a face. So just take one side of that. And in your mind, you probably already have an image of what a symbol of a profile would look like. And so what I'm going to have you do in a moment is I want you to just draw one side of that vase, just one profile. And as you can see here, if you're left-handed, draw the right side, draw the face on the right, which is actually facing left. And if you're right-handed, do it the way it is on the bottom. And you can do that now. Just go ahead. And no one else is going to see it. It's just for you. And then you can just draw the lines over the top once you get it and stop there. I don't want you to go any farther. And then what you can do once you've done that is maybe just touch your pen to the different spots on that profile that you drew and say what they are: forehead, eyes, nose, lips, chin. And that's the left brain and how it works. It takes a symbol that you have in your memory, and from that you can draw. And you notice that each part of that drawing has a meaning, a symbolic meaning. It correlates to something in your experience. So now what we're going to do is I want you to draw the other half of that face, but when you do so, I want you to make it a mirror image of the first one that you drew. And as you do so, you may just take a few moments. It may take you a little longer. Just notice how it makes you feel when you do that, as you do that. So, how are we doing? Not so good, she said. Anybody else? Any interesting reactions when you try and do that? A lot more concentration. It's harder. And what happens is this forces your mind to shift into the perceptive mode of awareness. Because in order to do that and to make it a mirror image, you have to actually perceive what's on the paper rather than perceiving the symbol that was in your mind. And this takes practice. It takes practice to shift over into that perceptive mode of awareness. So this is a very simple exercise right away just to give you a sense of what that feels like. It may seem difficult. It may seem like a little jerky, perhaps. And you also may notice that you're a little self-critical of your drawing and the quality of your image. And just like in the remote viewing sessions, in training to do remote viewing, noticing that criticality is important. And just like we did a few moments before when I had you notice what feelings you were feeling, do it again now. How did that make you feel? Are your thoughts different? Do you have even an emotional response to that? And some people do. It may take you back to second grade or third grade. And so at any time you are engaging in shifting over into your right brain, engaging in an intuitive mode of perception, any kinds of stimulus may arise in your consciousness. It may be a memory, it may be a feeling, it may be an emotion. And just like in the remote viewing training, if you can attend to whatever it is and notice it It will allow you to let go of it and to move beyond that and to stay present, basically. So it's not a matter of being judgmental. Even now, when you're feeling a temperature in your body, for instance, are you cold, are you warm? You're not being critical or judgmental of that. You may just notice it. Oh, I'm feeling warm. In the same way, you can just notice anything that you're perceiving. You can allow yourself to stay in an objective observer stance. Whatever the information is, whatever it is that engages your consciousness, you can also just notice it. And in doing so, that allows you to continue that method of spreading out your focus, spreading out your attention in a way that allows you to then engage with whatever the stimulus is. So even now, if you are someone that's trained in this, in doing remote viewing, say, or if you're a natural intuitive in some way, you may just naturally get intuitive information even now while you're sitting here. And to the degree that you can recognize and be aware of any information that's in your consciousness, it will allow you to be more present, to be more responsive, and to be able to engage in whatever that stimulus is. Regardless of whether or not you're doing remote viewing, if you're having a personal conversation with a friend, if you're at work, whatever you're doing, this will develop that consciousness practice. So going back to what Russell Targ said earlier, that there's this important element of self-consciousness and self-awareness that you can continue building with this kind of an interest. This group here interested in remote viewing, there can be a lot more to it than just reaching goals and reaching targets and having objective, quantifiable results. There's an internal process that is, in many ways, that can be much more exciting, or not much more exciting, but equally as exciting. And it can carry into many different aspects of our lives. So, okay, now I'm going to show you another way to shift your focus and shift your attention. There's a fellow named Dr. Les Femi who is a psychologist at Princeton University, and he is also a neurofeedback researcher. And back in the late 60s, early 70s, he became very interested in the reports on what alpha frequencies would do to personal experience. Many people were saying if they get into an alpha state, you'd have all kinds of these amazing experiences. So what he did is he hooked himself up to an EEG and tried to create alpha waves and had a hard time of it. He was trained very rigidly in his psychology training, and he was also an engineer, I believe. What he found is the harder he tried to create alpha waves, the more his alpha waves kind of stayed down at the lower end of the scale. That finally he got so frustrated that he gave up, and as soon as he gave up, the alpha peaked and went way up high. And that made him wonder a little bit. And so he did that several more times and found out that with practice he could learn how to create these alpha waves. And as soon as he was able to do that, that moment that he gave up trying, not only did he experience alpha, but he experienced a personal psychological breakthrough in terms of his felt sense of well-being. He felt like an immense load had lifted off his awareness. And so immediately he started wondering what's going on here. What is it with this alpha frequency, and how can I create it? As a psychologist, he wanted to know how he could help people get this sense of well-being. And so what he found is he started administering a series of hypnotic questions designed to ascertain depth of hypnosis. But in this case, he was just using it to see if his subjects would respond in a certain way to be able to create alpha at any point in the questionnaire. They found that generally most of the questions dealing with states of hypnosis, states of relaxation, didn't have anything to do with whether or not they had alpha. But there were two questions that did have significant results. And those questions were, can you imagine the space in between your ears? And can you imagine the space in between your eyes? What he found across the board is when people tried to imagine the space in between their ears, they immediately had a peak of alpha frequencies in their brain waves. So that kind of makes you wonder. And so he did a lot more exploring and experimenting with this idea of imagining space and what that does. And what he found in his theories are that trying to imagine space does not give your conscious analytical mind anything it can actually hold on to. And in doing so, it forces it to actually expand that focus of awareness, that focus of attention. So we started to see right away there's an aspect of how you attend to things that can also create this alpha frequency. Not necessarily the object of your attention, but the method of attending. And this he went on to create this theory called open focus. And what he says basically is that we have many different ways of attending. And he divides it up into 4 quadrants. Either narrow or diffuse, either objective or immersed or subjective. And that we tend to spend most of our time in a very narrow objective state up in the right-hand corner there. And that this rigidity in the way that we attend to things actually creates many, many different kinds of stress, many kinds of illness. What he found as soon as he started having people imagining space, not only did they create alpha, but they experienced spontaneous remission of all kinds of different physical illnesses and symptoms, and general states of well-being and relaxation. And that just came through the idea of imagining space. Now, the word imagining here is important because what it does, it allows you to experience it without having to try. What he found is if he told you, I want you to try and imagine space, that it would create a trying experience for you. And so the word imagination is important. It allows you to free up from the idea that you have to create it, that you're on the spot. So can you imagine right now that in the next few minutes you can experience any idea that I offer you in a way that's just right for you? Can you imagine that? So whatever the issue is, there is a way of approaching it that takes the pressure off, whatever the pressure is, to achieve something, to create something immediate. In this process, in this awareness practice, it's just like what Lynn Buchanan said about the targets. It doesn't matter what information you get. What matters is that you're learning something about how you're attending. You're learning something about your consciousness and your awareness. And in the process, you're learning experiences as well. You're learning to know what it feels like. So, I think what we'll do before I go a little farther is I'll have you pay attention for a moment to your pine cones. So what I want you to do is I want you to experience those pine cones. Can you imagine that you can allow yourself to experience them in whatever way is just right for you? And as you do so, just explore with all of your senses. What I want you to do is to look, to feel, to smell. You may even hear sounds as you're touching. And on your pieces of paper, I want you to just write down a few words that come into your mind, a few descriptors. Anything at all. And you may notice a mental reaction. You may feel something. You may feel silly, for instance. You may find it interesting. So once again, just tuning into what you're sensing, what you're experiencing as you do that. Some people even like to taste these. It may be a stretch for some of you. But you can try it if you want, and it won't hurt you. And you may notice that as you do so, you become aware of more information there, perhaps, than when you were just holding it while you were listening to me. There's more there, there's more going on. There's a whole range of words that come into your mind that might describe what you experience there, what you feel. So anytime you do this, it is in effect creating a bridge. It's bridging that sensory awareness to your ability to describe, to use language. Back to the first drawing on the modes of awareness, it's bridging the action mode to the receptive mode, the analytical to the perceptive. This is a very good exercise in any way that you can. If you can engage your senses in the present, what you're experiencing, it will carry over into your intuitive work. If you're experiencing intuitively a sensation, an image, an awareness of some kind, you'll have a better capability of describing it if it's something that you do. How much time do we spend doing that ordinarily? Do we spend most of our time objectively in narrow focus? So as you engage your senses, you may notice that suddenly you're aware of 2 or 3 senses. Your focus is expanding. It's not as narrow, it's more diffuse. And just as a note, this touching in with what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, is what I call an ecology check. Anytime you do it, the more you do it, the better you become at it, the better you become at being aware. So even now, as you're experiencing that, are you still aware of the sensation of your body sitting in the chair as you're experiencing the pine cone? And what Les Femi found is that you can have all of these different modes of attention simultaneously. He called that open focus. And he sells a tape series to help you experience that open focus. And I'll guide you through just a little bit of what that experience is like. What he found is that you can have access to and flexibility with all of these different states. And the more you use them, the better you get. And the more you use them, it doesn't inhibit your ability to focus when you need to, but it allows you to let go when you don't need that focused, objective awareness. For instance, many of us have seen cats, house cats or big cats, hunting and relaxed. And when a cat is relaxed, it is very much in its body, obviously very relaxed, flexible. And yet, as soon as a stimulus arises that captures its attention in some way, say it, perhaps maybe it's a mouse, immediately the awareness of that cat goes objectively and is focused. Everything else is forgotten. And it'll go for the mouse very, very effectively. And then, say that mouse gets away, it'll stand and wait and watch for a few minutes. And then it'll go back and sit down and stretch, get back into its body, let go, and its focus will diffuse again. And that's that flexibility I'm talking about, that ability to shift rapidly in and out, focused, back to diffuse. So can you focus on the pine cone, look at it, go back to what you're sensing, what you're experiencing. Focus, go back, flexibility. In many, many ways, you may learn many, many things about yourself just attending to that, just attending to what's in your awareness, how you attend to things. Interestingly, you may notice as you're perceiving this pine cone that there's some senses that you don't really engage in very much. Perhaps the sense of smell, it doesn't really attract you, and or you may not smell anything. Now, what I've found is that you may notice in your intuitive sessions, if you do any kind of remote viewing, that in the same way you may miss out on certain sensations, textures, dimensions, anything like that. So this kind of a process with ordinary tactile awareness will also enhance your ability to do remote viewing. This is a belief of mine, and it's an experience of mine. Okay, so now you can put down the pine cones. We'll let go of those for now. And is that something you can do? Is your attention still there, interested? And it takes a little practice. So can you imagine that you can experience what I'm going to describe to you in a few moments, whatever it is, once again, in just the right way that's right for you. There's no right way and there's no wrong way. So what I'd like you to do, let me see where my slides are at here. Oh, this was a little bit about how the action mode and the receptive mode kind of fit over that open focus. My sense is they all blend together. And this brings to mind another comment. Some people say that you don't need any kind of altered state to do remote viewing. Some people say it may be helpful in some way. The extended remote viewers tend to do that kind of a process. My experience personally is that in whatever way you can be flexible, allowing yourself to go in or out is more important than whether or not you can stay and maintain a certain state of consciousness. As a meditator, I'm also a hypnotherapist, that's what I do for a living, I have recognized in myself that the ability to go there enables you to do it spontaneously whenever you need to. So even when you engage in this pine cone, in a sense you're going into a trance because you're focusing on a sensation. And anytime you focus on one sensation, you remove yourself from all the other ordinary sensations that we are ordinarily entertaining in our consciousness. And anytime you do that, you are, in a sense, in a trance. So that entrancement may happen very, very quickly, very, very rapidly, and in effect, back to the open focus model, they may all exist simultaneously. So it's not a matter of whether or not you can go into a trance, or you need to go into a trance, or you need to stay objective. It's a matter of being flexible and allowing yourself to experience whatever it is that is in your awareness already. So what I'd like you to do is to just sit up straight, set your pine cones aside, and maybe take a deep breath or two. And then I would like you to allow yourself to close your eyes. And can you imagine once again that whatever you experience spontaneously, either perceptions or sensations, is what is just right for you. Now we know from physics and chemistry that each molecule is actually very, very small points of matter surrounded by vast regions of space. Protons and neutrons surrounded by electrons, vastly separated from each other. So can you imagine now that all of the cells and muscles and tissues in your body are also composed of vast regions of space? Can you imagine your whole body filled with space? And at the same time, can you imagine the perimeter or the circumference of your body, the exterior of your body, entirely composed of space? And at the same time, can you imagine the inside of your body as well as the circumference of your body, the edge, entirely filled with space? And even as you continue this, you may notice that your awareness has a tendency to shift or to drift in some way. And in whatever way that happens, that's just fine. As you start doing this kind of process, sometimes we overshoot our goal. You may feel as though you become sleepy, and that's okay. It'll stabilize, it'll level out. So can you imagine now that each inhale of your breath naturally coming in fills up all of that space in your body, filling it entirely with space? And can you imagine that with each exhale, as your breath flows naturally and smoothly out, that it leaves your entire body completely filled with empty space? Can you imagine that space? Is it possible to imagine all of the space outside your body, in front, behind, above and below, and to the sides, all the way out to the walls and the floor and the ceiling, completely filled with space? And at the same time, is it possible to imagine all of the space inside your body? And is it possible even to imagine that the edge of your body dissolves so that the inside, filled with space, and the outside, all around you, filled with space, become one and the same? And can you imagine that anything at all that comes into your awareness, any sensation, even one of discomfort, can you imagine that you can experience it just watching without needing to respond in any way, not needing to do anything or not do anything, just observing? And can you imagine that in the same way, is it possible to imagine that all the sensations or feelings you experience, you can allow into your awareness? Any smells, sounds, tastes, images, feelings, emotions, that they can all exist simultaneously, as well as the sensation of space within you and all around you. Can you imagine, is it possible to imagine in the same way that you can allow even any intuitive information you might receive in the same way into your awareness, as well as the sense of space inside you and around you? And then can you imagine allowing your focus once again to narrow just a little, allowing you to come back into your eyes, into your thoughts, just enough so that you can write down again on your paper any sensations, any feelings that you're experiencing. You can do so. And as you do so, can you even allow your sense of space, inside and outside, to stay with you as you focus on a thought, a word, a sensation? You may even notice how the sound in the room around you enters your awareness one moment and drifts away. And then allowing what is now in your visual field, the thoughts that are in your mind, even the sensation of your arm moving, if it is. Can you allow your gaze to rest again on the slide on the front of the room, while you allow that sense of space to stay with you, inside and outside? And with an image like this, you may notice how there seems to be a central object, like a flower. You could call that the subject of the slide. And the green area behind, you could call the background. So is it possible to imagine that slide as where the green area is the subject and the flower is the background? Is it possible? Is it possible to see the green area and the flower equally as neither subject nor background? In the same way, is it possible to see the image of the slide with the green and the flower as the background, and the area around the slide on the screen as the subject. Is that possible? In the same way, is it possible to allow the area around the slide as well as the information contained in the slide and the flower all to be equally balanced? Neither background nor subject. In the same way, can you imagine all of the information in your visual field, including the space in between you and the slide, including everything else that you see as the background, and your thoughts as the figure? Is it possible to imagine your thoughts as the background and all of the visual information that you are experiencing as the figure? And is it possible, can you imagine that all of the thoughts, activity in your mental awareness, as well as the visual information you are experiencing as the background, and the sounds that you hear as the figure? And so as you allow those movements to flow through you, you may notice sometimes it's a little easier one way and a little harder the other. In the same way, you can continue moving through all your sensations. And so once again, what I'd like you to do is just take a moment now on your paper, if you have any more room there. Just write down anything at all that you're experiencing. Any sensations, any thoughts, any feelings. Just observing, just noticing whatever it is. It's a process of awareness, of discovery. And in that sense, you can bring that discovery, that experience of perhaps seeing something differently into all of your practice, your remote viewing practice, your practice of consciousness, if you're interested in doing that. So can you imagine that from within that kind of experience, you could access or reach for something intuitive? Can you imagine that, what that would feel like? Allowing your attention to focus, perhaps, on a sensation or an experience. So in a moment, I'm going to show you another slide. And what I'd like you to do is just to allow yourself to go forward and look at what it's going to be. Can you imagine yourself just allowing whatever comes into your awareness now, any sensation, any experience, any feeling, to notice it, and to write it down if you want on your paper. And notice how it may move, it may change spontaneously in some way. And at the same time, just allowing whatever sense of that space that you have within you to remain inside and around your body. You may notice how your awareness spontaneously, all on its own, will shift according to whatever you're sensing. And thus you can follow a sensation as information, allowing it to become present in your awareness, to write it down, may even have a sense of an image or a visual and to sketch, and then letting it go, noticing, is there something else? And then in a few moments, I'm just going to show you that slide. And what I feel is an important part about this kind of awareness process is to realize that we continually can maintain this kind of an awareness, this kind of flexibility, moving inwards, moving outwards, focusing, becoming more diffuse. And so even as you get feedback, as I'm going to show you a picture in a few minutes, you may notice that your mind has a tendency to do something. Whatever that is, it may respond in a certain way. So you ready? Did I put everybody to sleep? Okay. And so what I'd like you to do, first of all now, to yourself, if you have any room on your paper, is just to describe that image to yourself. The first thing that grabs you, write down the first words. Might be shape, might be color, might be meaning, might be a more complex perception. And as you do so, that allows you to stay in that sensory awareness. What can easily happen is we become very critical as soon as we get feedback. We shift automatically back to that narrow, objective, focused state of awareness. And that's okay if that treats you well and you want to stay there, but you can also bring flexibility into this phase of any remote viewing exercise that you do. And so I feel it's an important aspect to engage yourself in the feedback, whatever it is. And as you do so, you may notice that there are perceptions there that you might have written down that your objective mind may not have been aware of. So it allows you to engage with it a little fuller, a little more deeply. And so I think, have we had enough of that? I'll leave it up for a minute. Oh, well, I'll leave it there. Do I need to hang it up here? Okay. So just as a recap now, the whole idea of flexibility in developing sensory awareness and attentional styles can bring a lot of more awareness into your practice, whatever your practice is. If it's remote viewing, if it's meditation, if it's self-exploration. The same thing, the same open focus exercises. Can you imagine space? When Les Femi did this with Buddhist meditators, a few of them had these amazing insights and breakthroughs in their practice where they had been practicing, say, for perhaps 20 years, and then suddenly had a new way of looking at meditation, what that experience of meditation was. So going back to what Dean Radin said earlier and Russell Targ, this ability to be aware, to practice a mental awareness, this is one way you can do that. Just being aware, tuning in, expanding your method of attending, the way you focus your awareness. Okay, I think that's all I'm going to talk about.